Episode 1. The Ledger Beneath the Altar. I never meant to find it. I was only dusting the altar, a task I'd done every Friday since my novitiate began. But that morning, something was wrong. The air felt thicker, like breath held in by stone, and the crucifix above me, once warm and familiar, seemed to watch. As I wiped along the marble edge, my cloth caught on something, a crack, thin, jagged, and recent. I leaned in. Beneath the altar's base, the marble had split in a way I'd never seen before. I pressed my fingers into the gap, expecting cold stone. Instead, they sank into something soft, like rotted leather. I recoiled. Curiosity, no. Something deeper pushed me back. I pulled harder, and the slab gave way with a low groan, like breath from a tomb. That's when I saw it, a book, bound in blackened iron, stained pages pressed together like dead skin. The cover had no title, just a symbol burned into his flesh, a wing pierced by a nail. I shouldn't have opened it, but my hands moved as if they were not mine. The book creaked open, and a foul wind rose from its spine. The pages weren't written with ink. The letters shimmered in a deep red, pulsing no, breathing with each name I turned. Names, thousands. Some I recognized from old graves in the monastery cemetery. Others were biblical. Some were marked with crosses. Others were circled in black. Then I saw it. Evangeline. My name. I frowned. See, not Sister Evangeline, not Mother Evangeline, just Evangeline, written in red, underlined 3 times. I blinked. My breath caught. The chapel lights flickered above me, and the stained glass window of St. Michael cracked with a sharp hiss. No, I whispered. No, this must be a mistake. I flipped pages in desperation, but the more I turned, the louder something rang in my ears, like distant bells, but they weren't ringing from above. They were coming from beneath the chapel floor. I slammed the book shut. The instant I did, my hand burned. I looked down. Red lines etched across my palm, as if the name had branded itself onto my skin. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the nuns' quarters. I washed my hands, prayed, cried, but the mark stayed. And that night, in my dreams, a voice whispered through the darkness. They never told you your name was borrowed. Sister, it belongs to us now. Episode 2. A name written in fire. I didn't sleep after that. How could I? The mark on my palm throbbed with heat all night, even though the room was cold as stone. I wrapped my hand in wet cloth, prayed with trembling lips, but nothing soothed it. The pain wasn't skin deep. It was inside me, like something ancient had sunk its teeth into my soul and refused to let go. By morning, I had convinced myself it was a dream. That's what the mind does, doesn't it? Protects itself from madness with soft lies. But lies can't explain fire. After morning prayers, I went to Mother Theresa's office. She had always been kind to me, a stern face but a soft heart. I thought she would understand. She didn't. The moment I mentioned the crack in the altar, her eyes narrowed. I didn't even get to the ledger before she raised a hand. That altar is sealed, she said firmly, and sacred. You must not speak such things again, Sister Evangeline. But no, she interrupted. We do not imagine things in this convent. We pray, we obey, and we do not disturb what has been consecrated. Her words slammed down like a closing coffin. That night, I returned to the chapel. I had to see it again. The altar stood untouched. No crack, no sign of disturbance, as if the stone had healed itself. I knelt before it, hands trembling. Why me? I whispered. The candles on the altar flared all at once, their flames bending inward toward the crucifix, like a breath inhaling. Then every wick blew out. I was left in silence and shadow until the crucifix above me wept. Not tears, fire. Tiny drops fell from the bronze Christ-sized, not burning the wood, not igniting anything, but hissing like oil in a pan. Each drop sizzled against the stone floor and vanished into nothing. I stepped back. Then I heard it, a voice, not aloud, not in my ears. It moved inside me, crawled up from the mark on my palm to the base of my skull. You belong to the ink, sister. My name began to burn on the ledger, though the book remained hidden. I could see it somehow, etched across the dark behind my eyes. I screamed. The chapel doors burst open. Sister Amara rushed in, her face pale, rosary swinging at her waist. "What are you doing in the dark?" she asked. I couldn't answer. I only stared at the crucifix. The fire had vanished. The candles were lit again. Everything was normal, but I knew it wasn't. And as I turned to leave, I glanced back one last time. The crack had returned, but now something was moving behind it, scratching. Episode 3. The bells that rang without hands. They rang at exactly 3:33 a.m. The bells, massive, rusted, and silent since the monastery's founding, roared into life like the sky itself was screaming. I jolted upright in bed. My breath caught mid-prayer. The sound wasn't joyous or solemn. It was angry, unnatural, the kind of ringing that didn't call you to worship, but warned you to run. Around me, the other nuns stirred. Whispers spread like fire through the sleeping quarters. "Sister Amara, do you hear that? They haven't moved in decades. Is it an earthquake?" But I knew better. I wrapped my shawl around me and stepped barefoot into the hallway. The floor was cold, humming slightly beneath my feet, not from the bells above, but from something below, like a heartbeat pulsing through the ancient stone. Outside, moonlight poured into the courtyard like milk spilled from heaven. I followed the sound up the stairs to the bell tower, each step creaking as if the wood feared what was above. The door to the tower was open. No one should have been there. Only Father Orius had the key. I stepped inside. The massive bronze bells swung wildly, ropes thrashing like serpents, though no hands pulled them. Wind howled in the enclosed space, but the air was still. The chains clanged, the iron groaned, and then, for a moment, the world stopped. One bell swung toward me and frowned in mid-motion, its hollow mouth yawning wide like it wanted to speak. Then it did. A low, moaning sound echoed from its core. Not a tone, a voice whispered, "Human, she's already marked." My blood ran cold, and then just as suddenly, silence. The bells halted, the ropes dropped limp, and from behind me, footsteps. I turned. Father Orius. He stood in the doorway, half-shadowed, his face unreadable. The lantern he held flickered dimly, casting long lines across the stone. "No one comes here," he said softly. "I heard the bells." I stammered. They ring by themselves. They never ring alone," he replied, his eyes fixed on mine, unblinking. "Hello, you've opened something, Sister Evangeline," he continued. "Something sealed for good reason." "I didn't mean to," I whispered. "The ledger," he said. I flinched. "How did it know?" "You saw it. You touched it. That's enough. It knows you now." "What is it?" I asked. "What is the book?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward and reached into his robes. I thought he might strike me, or bless me, or worse. Instead, he held out a small, folded parchment, brittle and yellowed with age. "Your name appeared once before," he said. "Long ago, in another century, on another sister's skin." I took it with shaking hands. Inside, written in blood-red ink, was a single phrase: "The bells toll not for the dead, but for those who are remembered in hell." Episode 4. The priest who never cast a shadow. I began watching him. After the bells, after the whisper, after the parchment that shouldn't exist, I couldn't look at Father Orius the same way again. There was something off about him, not just the way he moved, too slow, like his limbs were remembering how to be human, but the way the air shifted when he entered a room. It grew heavier, like the Holy Spirit left the moment he arrived. But what unsettled me most was what I didn't see. His shadow. It began at morning mass. The sun shone directly through the chapel's stained glass. Every nun cast long, soft silhouettes across the floor. I glanced around, as always, half praying, half fighting the rising panic that still lingered in my blood. Then he stepped to the pulpit, and the floor beneath him stayed lit. No shadow. None. I blinked, looked again, still nothing. I leaned to Sister Amara. "Do you see it?" I whispered. She furrowed her brow. "See what?" But I couldn't explain. Not yet. That night, I followed him. He left his chambers at midnight, walking silently down the corridor, robes brushing the stone like whispers. I trailed at a distance, barefoot, heart slamming like a drum in my chest. He didn't light a candle, didn't stumble, as if he didn't need light. He moved through the dark as if he belonged to it. He stopped at the confessional. That old thing hadn't been used in decades, though it was warped, the curtain moth-eaten. but he entered anyway, not to sit on the priest's side, but the sinner's. I crept closer, holding my breath, and then I heard it, a voice, but it wasn't his. It was layered, multiple voices overlapping, like a choir of whispers, all this in one word. Evangeline. The confessional door shook. The candles lining the chapel flared to life all at once, without flame, without spark. He stepped out, but now something clung to him, not visibly, not in the way you notice a cloak or a wound, but spiritually, like he had returned wearing someone else's skin inside his own. His eyes passed over me in the dark, and though I stood behind a column, hidden by shadow, he smiled, as if he'd seen me, as if he'd always seen me. He walked away. I dared to enter the confessional. The air inside was wet, foul. The scent of sulfur and blood hung thick in my lungs. On the floor, carved into the wood by a trembling hand, was a name, not mine, Luciana. I whispered it aloud, and the flame from the nearest candle died. Episode 5, Confessions Not Meant for God. He called to me the next night, not in words, but in a slow, dreadful pull, like my soul had been leashed to the chapel's old bones, and something deep beneath the floorboards was tugging the rope. I waited until all the sisters had retired to their cells, their prayers still echoing faintly in the halls like a lullaby for the damned. Then, barefoot and trembling, I made my way to the confessional. It was darker than before. The air felt wrong, like something had died and refused to decay. I stepped inside, and it closed behind me, not gently. The door slammed shut, rattling the wall. I spun around, heart clawing at my ribs, but the handle was gone, vanished, as if the door had no intention of opening again. Then, the whispering began, soft at first, like wind through brittle leaves, then louder, faster, voices bleeding through the wood from the other side of the partition. But I was alone. I knew I was alone. Still, the voices came, down scenes, hundreds, each one confessing, not sins, but inversions of them. I gave birth to silence and let it scream in the name of God. I drank the light until the stars went blind. I baptized him with the ash of angels, and phenome voice I recognized, my own, but not from this life. It was younger, hungrier, whispering a prayer I had never spoken, yet somehow remembered. I reject the crown of mercy. I wear the nails instead. I pressed my hands to my ears, but it didn't matter. The voices weren't around me. They were in me, burrowing through my thoughts like roots cracking stone. Then came the knocking, not on the walls, not outside the booth. Underneath, 3 sharp thuds from beneath the confessional floor, rhythmic and patient, like someone waiting to be let in. I dropped to my knees and placed my ear to the wooden boards. Breathing, there was breathing on the other side. Wet, and very much alive. Then something scraped along the underside. Metal against wood, etching something I couldn't see but could feel. A name, not mine, not yet, but it was close. The air grew thick. I began to choke. My lungs refused to pull in breath. My skin burned where the mark on my palm flared red again. Just before I passed out, I saw it, scrawled in blood, across the inner wall of the booth. Words no one had written with hands. These are not confessions. These are instructions. When I woke, the door was open. The chapel was quiet. The morning sun was rising. But on my tongue, I tasted something bitter and familiar. Ash. And when I looked down at my robe, stitched into the hemline in thread, I swear hadn't been there before, a phrase. Luciana asked. The light is out. Episode 6. The nun who was buried twice. There's a grave in the monastery garden that no one visits. Overgrown, unmarked, crooked. Sister Maria. She died before I arrived, or so I was told. Fever, they said. A peaceful death. She rests among the lilies now. But lilies don't bloom there, only weeds. And last night, I saw her. She walked past my window, not in ghostly shimmer, not in mist or moonlight, but in flesh. Bare feet brushing the soil, rosary tight in her fist, eyes closed, lips moving. She was praying. I told myself it was a dream, until I saw her again at dawn, kneeling near the statue of Saint Magdalene, weeping, not mournful tears, silent, resigned sobs, the kind that only the damned understand. I followed her. She didn't hear my steps, didn't turn. She walked like she belonged to another time, another layer of the world. We can't see unless it opens. She stopped at the grave, her grave, and then she vanished. No wind, no smoke, just gone. Only the rosary remained, lay gently on the stone. That night, I returned. I brought a lantern, a trowel, and a heart not nearly brave enough. I dug. The earth was soft, almost willing to be moved. The deeper I went, the colder it became, until frost clung to my fingers despite the summer heat. When, wood, a coffin, I hesitated, knuckles white around the edge. One final braid hand I pried it open, empty, no bones, no shroud, no sign of Sister Maria, except for one thing, a mirror, old, cracked, fogged from within, though untouched. I picked it up. It moaned, not from my hand, from inside the glass. And as I looked into it, I didn't see myself. I saw her, Sister Maria, eyes wide, mouth sewn shut with black thread. She reached toward me from within the reflection, fingers bloodied, clawing at the inside as if the mirror were her prison. And behind her thousands more, women in habits, burned, buried, forgotten, all staring, all screaming in silence. The mirror slipped from my hand, but it didn't shatter. It breathed. A single word formed on the glass, drawn in fog from the inside. Return. I staggered back, nearly dropping the lantern. The garden had grown cold. The weeds had vanished. All around me, lilies bloomed tall, wide, and reeking of rot. Then a voice from behind me, soft, feminine, cracked like dry parchment. You should not have opened her grave. I turned. It was Mother, fierce, but her eyes, they were hollowed, and her hands were clutching a shovel. Episode 7, The Mirror That Reflected Purgatory. I didn't take the mirror back to my room. I didn't dare. I buried it again beneath the soft, diseased lilies and ran back inside, blood on my hands and dirt in my breath. But it was no use. That night, it followed me. I found it sitting on the edge of my bed, clean, whole, and somehow warmer than the cold air that clung to the stone walls of the convent. No one had entered. No one could have. I locked the door. I prayed. It didn't matter. The mirror had returned, and it wanted something. It didn't show my reflection at first. Only fog, swirling like smoke in water. Then shadows took shape, a face, almost mine, but wrong in every possible way. Not pale, but gray. Not soft, but hollowed. And her eyes, oh God, her eyes, they were red, not bloody, burning, like coal that still remembered fire. She smiled, and I felt it, a twitch in my lips I didn't command. My body Saturday still on the edge of the bed, hands clasped, rosary coiled around my fingers, but in the glass, I saw her lean closer, and I could feel her breath on my cheek. She opened her mouth, and I heard my own voice. I'm not trapped in the mirror, she whispered. You are? Then the glass darkened, and I was no longer in my room. I stood in a hallway of mirrors, infinite, cold, stretching in all directions with no floor, no ceiling, just reflection upon reflection upon reflection. Each pane showed a version of me I had never lived. One wept blood, one had her hands cut off, one wore chains around her neck with tiny crucifixes stabbed into her flesh. One, the last one, simply smiled and whispered, we were all chosen, we just didn't choose him back. And then, I was falling, back into my body, back into the room, back into my skin like a screen shoved into a mouth. I woke on the floor, drenched in sweat and holy water. The bottle shattered beside me. The mirror was gone, but the walls of my room now held scratches, deep, jagged, clawed in lines that formed a single phrase over and over and over again. Reflect or burn. I fled. I ran barefoot to the chapel, into the arms of the only one who might understand, Father Orius. He stood at the altar, waiting, as if he had known I would come. I saw her. I said, I saw myself. I saw something. He didn't speak. He only raised a hand and pointed behind me. I turned slowly. The stained glass window above the entrance, Saint Michael, slayer of demons, had changed. The angel's face was mine, but it wasn't watching in mercy. It was watching in judgment. Episode 8, The Child She Never Bore. There was blood on my bed sheets. Not a wound, not from me, just blood, fresh, dark, still warm, as if someone had bled beside me in the night and vanished without a trace, except for that crimson stain. I hadn't bled in years, and yet something inside me pulsed with an ache I didn't recognize. I reached for my rosary, but it was no longer coiled beside my pillow. In its place lay a tiny object I couldn't comprehend. A tooth, small, white, perfectly intact, like it had fallen from the mouth of an infant. I choked back a cry and ran from the room, down the hallway, past the portraits of saints who now looked at me with sideways glances, their painted halos dimmed by a shadow I could no longer pretend didn't exist. That chapel was empty, but someone had lit every candle, hundreds of them lining the pews, the altar, even the floor, flames flickering like watchful eyes. And in the center of the room, beneath a crucifix, stood a crib, a wooden cradle I had never seen before, rocking slowly, gently, empty, or so I thought. I stepped closer, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. There was something inside, a single piece of parchment, folded delicately and tied with a blood-red ribbon. I opened it with trembling hands. No words, just a drawing, a child sketched in charcoal, faceless, cradled in arms that looked exactly like mine. Below it, in Latin, Mater Peccati, Mother of Sin. I dropped the paper and stumbled back, nearly knocking over the candles. My breath came in gasps. I didn't understand. I had taken my vows young. I had never known a man. I had never carried life within me. Yet something in the drawing ate inside my bones like a memory that didn't belong to me. Then I heard it, a cry, high-pitched, fragile, desperate. It came not from the cradle, but from the confessional, that cursed box where whispers turned into wounds. The curtain swayed. Though there was no wind, I approached. Each step felt heavier than the last, like something ancient was pushing against me. I pulled the curtain aside. No one, but in the seat, another drawing. This time, it showed me kneeling in the garden, holding a child wrapped in linen, my mouth open in song, my eyes blank. But behind me, rising from the soil, were arms, down scenes, reaching, calling, trying to pull me down. And on the back of the page, a new line written in blood: "You bury more than a mirror." Suddenly, I remembered the lilies, how soft the dirt had been, how easy it was to dig. Too easy. I fled, but all the while, I felt it, a weight inside me. Not guilt, not sin, something else, something alive. Episode 9. The Psalms that whispered back. The Psalms used to comfort me. Their rhythm, their certainty, the promise that even in the valley of death, I was not alone, that God's rod and staff would guide me, protect me. But not anymore. Now they talked back. It began during morning prayer. We were gathered in the chapel, candles lit, robes brushing the cold stone floor. Mother Thérèse led the reading. Psalm 23, she said, her voice echoing through the vaulted silence. "Let us lift our voices to the Lord." I opened my Bible, but the words had changed. Not just in phrasing, in meaning. The Lord is my shadow. I shall not escape. He makes me lie in desolation. He leads me beside waters that drown. I blinked. The letters shimmered, then bled back into the familiar scripture. No one else seemed to notice. The other sisters chanted in harmony, unaware that my version of God had just turned on me. That night, I stayed behind in the chapel. I brought with me an older Bible, one that had belonged to Sister Maria, long hidden behind the pulpit. Its pages were brittle, the edges torn, but it was real, untouched. I turned to Psalm 126. The moment I began reading, the chapel grew colder. Those who sow with weeping, my voice trembled, will reap with screams. I stopped. That wasn't what it said, and yet the words stared back at me, unmoving. I read them again. They will reap with screams. The candle beside me flickered, then whispered, a soft voice, like breath through teeth. "You remember now, don't you?" I dropped the Bible. It landed open, face down, and the whisper grew louder. I backed away, and then from the pulpit behind me came the sound of writing, scratching, scraping, as if someone was carving with a nail into the wood. I turned, nothing there, but on the surface, where the grain had always been smooth, I saw fresh gouges, a phrase burned in by unseen hands. The word was never meant for you. I fled to my cell, heart pounding, but the Psalms followed me. They echoed in the corners of my room, in voices I recognized. My own voice, Sister Maria's, even my mother's, though she died before I took my vows. Each voice recited a verse, each one wrong, and then I realized something that chilled me more than any ghost or dream. The book wasn't changing. My soul was no longer aligned with Scripture. The further I stepped from God, the more distorted His words became. Or perhaps they were never meant to comfort me in the first place. I opened the Bible one last time, desperate for one clean verse, one line of light. But there, in the center of that page, someone had scrawled a new psalm, Psalm 0. Blessed is she who hears the weeping of angels, for she has silenced heaven and opened hell. Episode 10. The Saint That Moved at Night. The statue of Saint Magdalene had always been my favorite. She stood near the garden gate, carved from pale marble, holding a jar of anointing oil. Her expression was sorrowful but kind, the face of a woman who had sinned and been forgiven. When I first arrived, I prayed to her every morning, asking for the same mercy. But lately, I'd begun to notice something strange. Each dawn, she was different, not in any way you could prove. A turn of the head, the jar cradled in her other arm, eyes that seemed to follow the path to the chapel, rather than gaze at the lilies. I told myself it was my imagination, until the night I decided to watch. The moon was high, the garden steeped in silver shadows. I sat at my cell window, rosary clutched tight, eyes fixed on her figure through the glass. Hours passed, my lids grew heavy. Then I saw it, a slow shift, almost imperceptible at first. Her head lifted, her gaze moved, and then her entire body pivoted toward the convent door. The marble didn't creak, it didn't crack, it simply moved, as if it had always been alive and was only now remembering. The jar tilted in her hands. Something dripped from it, not oil, blood, thick, black red, and glistening under the moon. It spattered the stone base, the grass, the path that led straight to my window, and then she stepped down. Her bare marble feet touched the soil with a sound like bone striking bone. The lilies around her withered instantly. She walked toward the chapel, the jar still spilling its contents in a steady trail. I couldn't breathe. I left my room and followed her, keeping to the shadows. She reached the chapel doors and they opened for her, not with a push or pull, but as if the wood feared her touch. I crept to the threshold and peered inside. The statue now stood in front of the altar, back to me, head bowed in prayer. The jar was empty. At her feet lay the ledger. It was open to a page I'd never seen before. Every name was written in the same red fire, but this time, they were burning away, one by one, the letters flicking into ash that vanished before it touched the floor. When she spoke, her voice was stone grinding against stone. They do not belong to him anymore. I stepped inside. Her head turned just slightly, and for the first time, I saw her face clearly. It was mine, not the me I knew, but the me from the mirror, the me that smiled with burning eyes. And in her hand now was not the jar, it was the ledger. She held it out to me and whispered, "Take it. You've carried it in your blood long enough." Episode 11. The Truth Buried Under the Cross. The earth beneath the chapel was not holy. It pretended to be cloaked in prayer and hymns, softened by incense and candlelight. But underneath, beneath layers of stone and centuries of silence, something had been buried, not forgotten, hidden, and now it was calling me. I didn't sleep that night. The ledger lay on my desk, untouched since the statue of the other me placed it in my hands. It no longer hissed or burned. It simply waited, like a dog that knew its master would return. The next morning, I found the door behind the altar open. No one saw me slip through. No one would have dared to follow. The passage led downward, deeper than I thought the chapel allowed. The walls were carved with symbols I didn't recognize. Not Latin, not scripture, older, primitive, holy only in the way fire is holy, dangerous and consuming. At the bottom, I found the cross, not the one above the altar. This one was carved directly into the stone floor, massive, scorched, and pulsing faintly with heat. It was surrounded by chains nailed into the wall, each ending in a rusted shekel, as if something had once been held here, or someone. A plaque lay cracked at the base of the cross. I brushed off the dust and dirt, and the name beneath struck me like lightning. Sister Evangeline 1497. I staggered back. Impossible. A mistake. But the rest of the inscription tore the breath from my lungs, burned for revealing the name of the angel who fell. cursed to remember, buried to silence. I dropped to my knees. The floor vibrated beneath me, and from the cross itself rose a voice faint, broken, stitched together by centuries of pain. You were not the first. I turned. No one there. You are the echo. It whispered. My hands trembled. What am I? The voice answered. A vessel. A copy. A curse renewed. The original Evangeline spoke the name aloud. She remembered it. You carry it. The chains rattled on the walls. Each generation, she rises. Each time, the church buries her again. But this time, they were too late. The cross flared red, and then something began to rise from beneath it. Bones, not broken, not charred. Oh, a skeleton clothed in tattered robes, identical to mine. Around its neck hung a rosary of obsidian beads, and in its hand, a mirror. I leaned in the mirror, my face, but behind my reflection, down scenes more. All the same, all me, screaming, praying, burning, all forgotten, until now. Then the voice returned. Only one truth remains. You are not cursed because you sinned. You are cursed because you remember what the church forced the world to forget. I backed away, heart pounding. The ledger in my hand burned again, but this time, not in pain. It glowed, and a new page turned on its own, blank, waiting for one final name. Mine. Episode 12, The Blood Covenant. I didn't open the ledger again for 3 days, but it didn't need to be opened. Wherever I went, I felt its weight, like it wasn't a book anymore but a wound stitched to my ribs, seeping guilt and memory through every breath. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The other sisters noticed. They spoke to me gently at first, then with fearful glances. I was becoming something else, and they could feel it. On the 4th night, I returned to the chapel, not to pray, to bleed. The ledger waited on the altar where I left it. No dust, no ash, as if time didn't touch it, only intention, only sin. I stood before it, trembling. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Father Orius. He emerged from the shadows like smoke crawling from a broken censer. Pale, hollow-eyed, his robes darker than usual, almost black, save for the blood-red sash around his waist. He didn't look surprised to see me. I see the book he has chosen, he said. I didn't answer. He stepped closer, voice soft. It always comes down to one thing. Sister Evangeline, balance. He reached into his robe and pulled out a small blade, ornate, ancient, the handle carved with symbols I had seen deep beneath the altar. You cannot erase your name, he said, but you can cover it. Ah, I whispered. He smiled. With blood not your own. I took a step back. You want me, to? No, he said. The book wants. It demands a trade. That's the covenant. A soul for a soul. One name off the page, another written in its place. My heart twisted. Oh, he tilted his head. You already know. And I did. Sister Amara. She had been the closest to me, the kindest, the only one who ever looked at me like I was still human even now, even as the others whispered behind closed doors, even as my reflection grew stranger by the day. But that was the price. If I wanted to live, truly live, free of the burning mark and the mirror's gaze I had to give her. I looked at the ledger. Its pages fluttered open again, blank, waiting. I felt the blade in my hand. Before I realized I'd taken it. Warm, wanting. I stood there for a long time. Then I walked out, into the hallway, down the corridor, to her cell. She was asleep, peaceful. Her rosary hung from her fingers. Her lips moved with dreamed prayers. And for a moment, I envied her, not for her purity, but for her ignorance. I raised the blade. My hand trembled, and, her eyes opened. She looked at me, not with fear, but knowing, and whispered, "It was never supposed to be you." Episode 13, Hell's Choir. They began to sing at 3:33 a.m., not with voices trained by choir masters, nor with melodies meant for praise. These songs were not for heaven. They were for remembrance, and for revenge. The sound rose from beneath the chapel floor, soft at first, like wind brushing through old graves, then louder, layered, hundreds of voices, thousands, twisted in unison, weeping and howling the same impossible melody. They were singing my name. I fell to my knees in my cell, hands pressed to my ears, but it didn't help. The music wasn't around me. It was inside me. It poured through my chest, vibrating bone and blood. The walls trembled. The crucifix above my bed cracked clean down the center and fell, its wooden Christ shattering on the stone floor. Then the bells rang. Not just one, all of them. Every bell in the monastery screamed to life. The dead tower bells, the chapel chimes, even the handheld funeral bells that hadn't been touched in decades. And they weren't calling the living to prayer. They were calling the damned to rise. I ran into the hallway. Sisters fled their cells in panic, some crying, others praying, none understanding. But I did. I knew. The ledger had been opened too long. The covenant had been refused. And now the names it held were no longer content to be read. They wanted to be heard. In the chapel, the marble floor cracked in a jagged line from altar to pews. From the fissure rose smoke, thick, wet, pulsing like a long inhaling breath after centuries buried in silence. And from that smoke came them, figures draped in ash and torn habits, faces half formed, skins still melting like wax under eternal flame. Some wept, some laughed, all sang. I recognized some. Sister Maria, the founder, the first Evangeline. Even the statue, once cold and still, had stepped down from her pedestal and joined the procession, her bloody jar held high. They moved through the chapel, circling, their song building into a crescendo of agony and exaltation. At the center stood the ledger, wide open, pages flipping wildly, faster and faster, glowing red hot, smoke rising from its spine. And silence, all at once, as if every voice had inhaled and held its breath. And in that stillness, a single voice, clear, male, cold, rang out from the altar. You refused the trade, sister. It was Father Aureus, but he looked hollow, as if the man had been scraped clean from the inside, and something older now wore his skin. You were offered salvation, a simple sacrifice, but you held on to your pity. He lifted the ledger high, its pages burning like scripture dipped in hellfire. Now they will choose. I stepped forward, barefoot, bleeding, unafraid. In the choir, my choir turned to me. They did not hate me. They awaited me. Every name in the ledger was mine to command, because I was not the girl who found her name in hell's ledger. I was the reason it was written. Episode 14, The Judgment of the Damned. The smoke parted for no man, but it parted for him. He stepped from the pulpit like a tear in the fabric of the world, not a demon, not a beast, but a presence so ancient it made the crucifix tremble. At first, I thought he was human, beautiful, blindingly so, hair like threads of starlight, skin pale as candle wax, robes white without stain except for the wings, charred, two blackened stumps stretched from his back, twisted and scorched, feathers long since burned away, in his eyes hollow rings of gold, burning not with warmth but memory. This was no demon, this was an angel, but not one from heaven, one left behind. He walked slowly toward the altar, the ledger floating above his palm like a child's toy. The book is not a punishment, he said. His voice echoed with the sound of bells, not once wrong by rope, but wrong by judgment. It is a record, he continued, a list of those who have touched the divine and dared to reject it. He looked at me. You burned before, he whispered, and yet here you are again. I stepped forward, the choir of the damned behind me, their mouths shut now, their hollow eyes fixed on the scene, like disciples awaiting gospel. I didn't reject God, I said. I was used. The angel tilted his head. Is that what you tell yourself? That you were a lamb led astray? I clenched my fists. I remembered what they tried to erase. I saw the ledger. I saw her. I am her. Yes, he said. And so was the one before you, and the one before her. All versions, all vessels, all forgotten. He dropped the ledger onto the altar. It didn't thud. It screamed. The book's pages opened, flipping to the final entry, still blank, still waiting. The cycle ends only when the chosen makes a choice. He said, choice? I asked. I chose to not kill, to not sacrifice an innocent. No, he said softly, you chose silence, and silence is what wrote your name in fire. He lifted a hand. The choir screamed. All at once, a shriek that cracked the stained glass above, sent pews splitting down the center, made the ground shudder. Choose, Evangeline, the angel said, eyes burning brighter. Take their sin and be damned in their place, or walk away and leave them to rot. The ledger lifted again, glowing. Two names appeared on the final page. Mine and hers, Sister Amara. My knees buckled, my heart fractured. He was offering me what no one else had, a second crucifixion, not of flesh, of memory, to take every soul in the book into myself, to become not a saint, but the final sinner. Behind me, the choir began to hum a low, mournful song I somehow already knew, a song for endings, and I began to sing with them. Episode 15. The names she chose. Names have power. The first thing we're given, the last thing we lose. When they burn your body, it's your name they speak. When they bury you, it's your name they carve. And when the devils come to claim what's theirs, it's your name they whisper into the dark. I stood before the ledger, its pages glowing, trembling, and saw them both. Evangeline, Amara, one of us would burn. The angel waited, wings still smoldering, silent, held no blade, offered no mercy, only decision. Behind me, the choir, my choir, hum low, like 1,000 souls holding their breath. Amara knelt beside the altar, her face wet with tears, not fear, but grief. She knew what I was about to do, and she would never stop me, because Amara was good, and I was chosen. I reached out, my hand hovered over her name. All I had to do was press it. The ledger would take her, erase me, the book would close, the voices would go quiet. I'd be free, but I didn't press. Instead, I turned the page, blank, pristine, unwritten. I picked up the quill that had appeared beside the ledger, not placed there by the angel, not offered by heaven or hell, but summoned by me. The feather trembled in my hand. I dipped it into the fire, bleeding from the angel's broken wing. The flame didn't burn, it remembered. And slowly, deliberately, I wrote, Lochana, the name I've seen in the confessional, the name scratched into the margins of dreams, the name that meant light bearer, but never said which light. The ink sizzled, the page caught fire, the ledger snapped shut hard enough to crack the altar beneath it. The choir stopped, the angel stepped forward, eyes blazing. That is not your name. No, I whispered, but it's the name you erased. He stared at me. You think you've rewritten fate. I've restored it. The chapel walls began to peel. The stained glass shattered inward. Every candle flared once bright as stars, then went dark. And then, silence. For the first time, true silence. No whispers, no screams, only stillness. The angel's body began to crumble feather by feather, ash falling like snow. He looked at me one last time, no hatred in his face. Only, oh, you remembered. Then he was gone. So was the ledger. So was the choir. The altar cracked open. Beneath it, a staircase. Not down, but up. I turned to Amara. She was already crying. What did you do? She whispered. I gave it back. I said, not to them, not to him, to her. To who? I smiled. To me. 1 week later, the chapel collapsed. No bodies were found. No books, no names. Only a scorched marble fragment with a single word carved into its surface, Lochana. And in some corners of the world, they say the bells still ring, but only for those who remember the name they were never meant to carry.
Epilogue, the one who watches the smoke. They built a new chapel atop the ruins. White stone, pure lines, unblemished wood. The kind of place where sin had no place to hide. And everything smelled of fresh paint and holy oil. But underneath it, the old bones still whispered. Tourists come now. Pilgrims. They light candles for saints they barely remember. They pray with lips that never speak the full truth. And some, only a few, linger too long by the back wall, near the spot where the light never quite reaches. There, in a small locked glass case, sits the only remnant from the fire. A single marble fragment, blackened, burned, unyielding, carved with one word, Lucerna. Most don't know what it means. Just a name. They assume. A saint. Maybe. A relic from an older rite. But sometimes, late at night, when the last priest has gone to bed and the bells are still, someone hears it. A voice. Soft. Worn like ancient cloth. A woman's voice. Whispering names not spoken in centuries. Some say the mirror still exists, though the church denies it. They say it appears to those whose guilt runs deeper than their baptism, reflecting not what you are, but what was buried inside you long ago. And sometimes, when no one is watching, the statue of Saint Magdalene turns ever so slightly toward the east, facing the old graveyard, where no lilies grow, only stone and silence. But the story doesn't end there, because in a town far from the monastery, across the sea, maybe, or just beyond the forest where the fog never lifts, there lives a woman in gray. She owns no mirror. She never prays aloud. She walks barefoot, even in winter. Children fear her. Dogs won't bark near her. Birds never fly above her roof. She speaks to no one, but watches everything. And each year, on the anniversary of the fire, she lights a single candle at exactly 3:33 a.m. The flame burns red. The wax drips upward. And if you listen closely, if you dare stand by her door as the candle flickers, you'll hear it. A choir, singing one name, not in pain, not in worship, but in remembrance. Lucerna, the one who remembered too much, the one who chose to carry them all, the one who rewrote her ending, in fire.